Welcome to Lisa's Book Club. We're super excited because we're continuing our discussion on More Than a Body. Your body is an instrument, not an ornament. And I have a special guest, my friend Natalie. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
We have been talking a lot about this book.
Yes,
Even
it's so good.
in between here. And so I kept saying, save the gems, because you said it's like drinking from a fire hydrant or fire hose, right?
A little bit. It's felt like that mainly because, and we were just saying this too, I feel like so much of what they describe in this book is like, oh, I thought it was just me and my own mental hurdles and my own issues. And the way that they're able to say like, no, this is a common, it's like an ocean we're all in, if that makes sense, and the way that they put it. I loved that. I loved how I immediately just felt like, oh, so I'm not insane. Like,
Right.
So like most women go through this with their bodies too.
Yeah, and we hide a lot of it, I think, because of those feelings of shame.
Yes.
So right at the beginning, we're in chapter 3, from self-objectification to self-actualization.
Yeah.
I was immediately struck and I think really pulled in by just the very beginning. Like, have you ever stayed home or not participated in an activity, anything, because of how you looked? Because you were worried about how you looked,
right?
Not necessarily how you looked.
Yeah.
Did that give you pause?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
I'm like, who would say no to that? I think back, especially when I was younger, like teenage, college age, I remember doing that more often.
Really?
I feel like now, I don't know. I had a really weird experience, and you'll probably relate to this too. This is just like an actress thing, but maybe it's not an actress thing. Where like sometimes I was reading this, especially about the self-objectification of like thinking about how you look from an outside perspective, when like it's kind of your job to be aware of like a camera angle or how you're looking.
That's super
Or like,
interesting.
is this emotion gonna read this way if I'm doing it this way? Or that you have to be so aware of how you look. That like, how do you create a healthy boundary there that's just not like the way you live life? Like, it took me right back, and I don't think it was that question necessarily, but it was more of like a time that you caught yourself really self-objectifying. And I remember when we were on Studio C, and I had all 3 of my pregnancies on Studio C. I was postpartum 3 times. Like my body looks different in every season because it was going through a lot of stuff. And I remember we would have dress rehearsal on Thursday nights. They go really late. Friday before the show, we'd all get together and watch all the dress rehearsal footage. And the point of the dress rehearsal was to make sure the camera angles are right and to be aware of things that were going on. But in my mind, I spent so much energy of like, oh, I got to suck in here. I got to move on this angle. I got to make sure this doesn't look good. That shirt is a little baggy. I should tuck it. Like, I was paying attention to how I looked more than like my performance or my lines or was the joke landing. I spent so much energy on my appearance.
Oh.
And part of it,
I feel bad, but yet I also relate to that. And I don't think that I thought that I was like self-objectifying.
I thought I was doing my job.
Me too.
Right?
Yeah.
But like, with that show in particular, like, hello, you're not a supermodel. You're on a sketch comedy show. Like, it's your job to be funny.
Right.
Like, focus on that kind of thing. I wish I could go back and tell myself that, but I immediately was, like, brought back to that footage room of, like, oh, yeah, I would literally just, like, write down what I needed to do differently in my body.
Oh.
But, like, again, I thought that was my job.
Right.
And so that was a weird, I didn't even realize I was doing it until I read the book. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense.
Oh yeah, that's an insane thing to do. Like, who wants to waste so much energy on like how they look versus like, look at this great job you have and this fun thing you get to do with your friends instead of like, oh man,
right?
I really should have tried to lose those 10 pounds before season starts. You know what I mean?
Oh, I do. Yes. Unfortunately, know what you mean. And that self-objectification, meaning that your identity is split into 2, was really eye-opening to me.
I've never heard it put that way, but that's exactly how it feels.
It does, because it feels like you're you and what you think and what you're trying to do or create, and then you're observing yourself from the outside, looking in like, how are other people seeing me?
Right.
And sometimes I have thought, oh, this is just an actress thing. But it's not.
Yes.
Everybody. And I'm like, oh, I've got to fight against that.
Yeah.
Because I, am in a weird industry or people comment on my looks, even though that's not my job.
Right.
I mean, I literally do a podcast.
Right.
right?
But now we're filming it.
But now we're filming it.
Dang it. Just kidding. No, but it's such a strange split in my mind too with the career thing where, part of the roles you get, part of the things you do is how you look, right? You have to fit a certain look. And that's part of the toxicity in that industry anyway. And I think it's getting better and better. But yeah, I think as I've read this chapter, I've been like, man, my whole 20s was like, I felt like I had to self-objectify to be good at my job.
Oh.
And no one said that to me.
But that is the assumption.
That's the, they talk about we're all in this like ocean of self-objectification and we're all trying to like make our own rafts in it. And
okay, so I want to push back a little bit because sometimes there is, it is part of the craft. Like I'm thinking, whether it's on the stage or for acting in front of the camera too, you have to find your light.
You do. You have to like know your angle.
You have to know your angles because it is a visual medium.
Right.
And so it's not completely, but see, then this is where my brain like goes down it like any good thing, art included, it can cross the line and where it becomes too much and destructive.
No, I agree. And I think it's more about finding that balance of like, okay, I'm on a set, I'm doing my job. I need to make sure I'm delivering what they've hired me to do, all that kind of stuff. But your value and your like everyday life doesn't have to be so like,
oh, I love that.
Pulling at things. And like they give the example really early of like, have you ever been at the gym on the treadmill and like pulled down your shirt or pulled things down because you're imagining what the guy behind you must be seeing on the treadmill? It's like, yes, wait a minute. Is there another way to think? Yeah. Like, that's kind of how it felt. It's like, yes, of course it's how I feel whenever I'm there.
Yeah,
you're always just aware of people looking at you.
Right. And the point that gets you, it really got me at the beginning of this chapter was when we are doing that, when we're so concerned with when we're picturing ourselves, we're not living fully.
Oh, totally.
And that's when I was thinking, okay, so if I'm worried too much about, finding my light or the right angle or whatever, or worried about like what I'm wearing, then I'm not acting, I'm not creating, I'm not in the moment.
You're not in the flow.
I'm not in the
as they say.
flow.
Yeah,
and they talk a lot about the flow. And I wondered from your creative standpoint what you thought about that flow.
I feel like I've definitely felt in the flow and I've definitely felt self-conscious on like, I've had moments like that for sure.
So that idea for people who aren't familiar with, like it talks about in chapter 3 of just being so lost in creating and not outside of it that you can really get into it.
Yeah.
And it's such a great feeling.
I feel like for me, that's happened more often in a writer's room than in front of a camera, which I guess makes sense, right? When you're being filmed or, another strange thing, and again, this might be too niche for actresses, so you can cut this out if you need to, but like when you're on a set and it's like two teams' job is your appearance, if that makes sense. There's a hair and makeup team and there's a wardrobe team and there's a lighting team. It's like there's all these people here just for how you look on that camera, right? And so I think that's it's obviously not reality, but it's such a strange way to be. And so I feel like when I am on camera, it's harder for me to be more present, which makes sense, I think. And something I'm definitely working on. But when I'm like more in a writer's situation, especially around people I'm super comfortable with, and maybe this is more of like a culture thing too, but like you know this, like if you're writing from home, you can be in your pajamas and comfortable and like your appearance has nothing to do with what's on the page. And so I definitely felt more times in a flow when I'm just like not even thinking about how I'm looking or feeling. It's more about what I'm actually focused on. It's so interesting.
That is so interesting. I think that the times that I've been in flow is when I've had to like give myself permission to.
Yes.
So sometimes like on set, especially if we're doing improv or something like that and you're just trying to create.
Right.
Sometimes knowing that there's somebody like with hair and makeup or wardrobe is sort of freeing because I think they'll figure it out so I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, that's a great like mindset shift.
But I do have to make a conscious choice.
Yeah.
Like to just flip it over.
And that probably just flags like the people pleaser in me. Like I can't tell you how many times I'd show up to set and be like, I'm so sorry, I have a zit. Your whole day's gonna be so hard.
Yeah.
Like for my makeup, and they'd be like, it's fine. That's why we're here.
That's so interesting that you bring that up though, because that people pleasing is part of what they talk about in this and how we are putting the other person who we're even imagining, so it's not even real.
Right.
Their sort of comfort and and approval above our own
Right.
just sense of being.
Right.
Which when you put it like that,
It sounds insane.
It sounds insane.
I do it all the time.
Yeah.
And anyway, it's crazy.
Oh, I found this. Flow is a mental state in which you are fully immersed in a feeling of energized focus, full involvement, and enjoyment in an activity.
Yeah.
And I just thought, oh, that's just like watching little kids play.
Right. Totally. And
And you just want them to have that feeling forever.
Yeah. That same quote I underlined and I wrote ugly characters on Studio C. Let me tell you why. So like me and Mal and Whit would always talk about how anytime we had like prosthetics or like we played like an old crazy lady or, you know, somebody that looked really different and had nothing to do with like beauty, if that makes sense, like a quote unquote ugly character or somebody who's like gross or different. All of a sudden, it was so free to play, if that makes sense.
No, it does.
So much more than just like, I'm Natalie in the living room.
I don't know
what
if you
mean?
remember, but I was a guest performer.
Of course, how can I forget?
On Studio C, where I played like a 90-year-old balding grandma who was pregnant.
Yeah, it was supposed to be Mal.
Yeah. And I got it.
It was the best.
The best.
You nailed it.
A balding grandma who was pregnant. It was wonderful.
Because like all of a sudden, I don't know.
Then I got
It's
to be
hard
just totally
articulate.
like silly.
Yes. It does feel like kids playing. Because all of a sudden it's like, who cares? Who cares if I have rolls on my hips and like too much weight?
So sad?
I'm this like I'm playing like a balding middle-aged man. And so it doesn't matter. Like my beauty doesn't matter in this moment. So I'm just going to have tons of fun.
And that is really interesting to me that it doesn't matter now.
It doesn't.
Because
You're totally
in the
right.
other, that makes the assumption then in all the other times that it matters.
Right.
And it doesn't.
It doesn't, but it feels so much like it does. Anyway, it's just a really interesting thing to process.
really, really
like now
is.
being on the other end of it.
Well, and it does make me think about to being on the other end of it, like what I missed out on, and then like a resolve of like, oh, I'm not going to miss out on that again.
Yes, that's how I feel. I feel like I remember when I first barely had my first kid, I had a swimming incident. The authors talk a lot about how like they're invited swimming and they would always make excuses, but they're big swimmers. And anyway, the swimming thing I related to because I remember we were going to go to the pool or something with Jack as a baby, and I was so nervous that I didn't get in the pool. And I saw my husband having fun with him, and I was like, this is not the mom I'm going to be. I'm just not. And I'm really grateful for that experience because I, like, no matter how I'm feeling, I put on the suit and I get in the water. It's like, nobody cares. Nobody's thinking about your body as much as you are. Like, that's what the kind of my self-talk of like, no one cares. No one cares what you look like. And you're kind of talking yourself out of having such fun experiences with your kids. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I got really kind of depressed reading the beginning of this chapter because of the statistics. Because this is all based on research.
I know.
And I kind of hope it's getting better, but it was 71% of women ages 18 to 35 in our research, right, self-objectified without even knowing it.
Yeah.
Without even knowing it.
Right.
And 82.5% of women stay home from events or activities because of their
82%
parents.
is so many people.
It's like almost all of us have stayed home or regularly stay home.
I wonder if that statistics changed after 2020.
I don't
Do you
know.
feel like it's worse or better?
That is such
probably
a good
worse.
question. I wonder, and it gets worse because then I was like, well, maybe it's just like a subset of us weirdos. No, it's like across all different cultures and ages
You
and
just think of how
ethnicities
much
and backgrounds. And I'm like,
that
so it's
equates to, like how much energy
so
and
much.
time. That does break my heart a little.
Well, and that's that. And I love how they thread it right from those horrible statistics to asking the question, like turning it in on the reader, which I feel like is such a great device of saying, like, what joy have you missed out on? What creation and all this stuff. And they're really gentle about it, but very pointed.
Yeah.
And talking about that sort of using that as a platform to jump off on saying, we have some beauty work to do.
Yes. I think they set up the problem really well.
Yeah.
And I remember reading that and having like a panic for my daughters.
Me too.
I was like, no. my daughters can't be that 82%. Like, I don't want them to be, even though I'm in that 82%. I'm sure you, like, at some point, I feel like I'm not really anymore, but definitely my younger self, I would be like, nah, I don't want to do that. You know, like,
Well,
because
I think it's interesting because I think you have to have constant vigilance because it's so pervasive in our society.
Yeah.
So we might think, oh yeah, I don't care what I look like in a bathing suit anymore. Like that's not going to stop me. And then it'll be something else.
Or then you actually
like,
put on the bathing suit and you're like, well, maybe I care a little.
Yeah, and why do I care? And then you get down on yourself for caring, and then it's like another like cycle because it's such a thing.
Yeah.
And it might not be weight, but it might be height, it might be aging,
totally.
It might be like in talking to a lot of different women about their bodies, it's different for every like you can pick anything and criticize it, and
it's nuts.
It makes me sad.
It makes me sad and a little mad. Yeah. But mainly just like it's insane. Like I really like how they clearly outline like when your standard of happiness is a beauty standard, it's literally like beauty standards change constantly.
All the time.
Like whatever's in. So you just literally can't keep up. It's an impossible ideal.
Well, and I read an article. Don't you love it when people say that? And I don't cite it.
I read most of an article.
You guys read so many articles. And that basically was saying that if you look at technology, and this makes a lot of sense, like the invention of television, but then now social media, it has expedited the cycle of sort of beauty trends. Right. And so now they're changing so quickly and so fastly.
Yeah.
It's becoming harder to keep up, but then you're spending more time and energy trying to keep up because there's so many points to sort of pivot.
Terrible, like hamster wheel. It just sounds like,
so we're
all going to go crazy. Yeah, let's just hop off.
Yeah, and I just opened up to the part that said, these things don't make you any happier in the long term. They don't even earn you love.
Right.
Being defined by our appearance is the real problem.
Right.
Like being defined by it. It's not what you look like. It's not changing it to fit a trend or whatever, but it's like being defined.
Right.
Oof. So what kind of beauty work are you doing?
Well, it sounds like, what kind of work have you done?
No, that's what usually like people say, but I mean like, how do you like
Let me tell you, the only thing I'll say is I haven't done Botox because I'm terrified of needles. But I feel like I probably would have at some point if someone told me to, but I didn't. Yeah. Anyway.
You don't need it. And then what are we doing?
And then what are we doing?
Then you have to do one more thing.
You know what I mean? It's funny, during that section of like what they define as beauty work, which is more just like working on like why you do the things you do.
Right.
Why do you put on makeup in the morning? Why do you, or do you not? And that's fine. Like what kind of choices do you make with your beauty? I feel like now every time I get ready for the day, even get ready to come here, I feel like I normally would have tried on like a bunch of different outfits. I would have been a little bit more, but I was like, this feels comfortable, and I just put it on, and I saved like 30 minutes of my day.
That's great.
Just from like a different idea of beauty work in my mind. I feel like I love to look put together, but I also I feel like in general, I'm a very lazy beauty person, if that makes any sense. Like I've never dyed my hair. I cut my hair like once a year.
Yeah.
I take maybe 5 minutes, put on makeup, and I do eyelash extensions because it's easy.
Yeah.
And that's it. And
You've got your system.
I do think a little bit of my laziness has helped me detach value to that a little bit. Yeah. Of like, it's mainly just because, I'm a mom. I don't have a lot of time. Yeah. I want to feel like I'm put together. But I don't have a lot of time or money to spend on it.
Right.
So that's but anyway, that was kind of my self-reflection for that section of like, why do I do that? And why do I care so much about what I'm wearing and what angle this is and all that kind of stuff? Man, it's a ton of work.
Yeah, is it for you or is it for someone else?
It's really hard to know.
I have a hard time with this because I like dressing up.
Yeah.
And I like makeup, and I like as a creative.
Yes.
And I like clothes, and I like serums and things.
Yes.
And some of that is self-care, but I'm like, where is the line? And I was having this conversation with my daughter yesterday in anticipation for this, actually, and we were kind of talking about it because I kind of wanted to check in on her. About how she was feeling at 15.
Right.
About her appearance and things like that. And I said, I just give myself a certain amount of time just to get ready. And then I just try to forget about it the rest of the day.
Yeah.
Like I try to think, no, you already did that. Now it's time to do something else.
That's a good way
instead
to
of,
give it its time.
I don't know.
I think that's a really good piece
I
of
think
advice.
it's important to check in with yourself.
I think so too. Because then there's also days where like if I feel like I'm not putting in an effort at all, I almost feel like my energy feels different, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
If I like don't shower for a few days, I wear the
Yeah.
same clothes, like if I'm just kind of
I don't feel like
it,
myself then.
I don't feel like that's really honoring yourself either.
No.
But so anyway, I think you're right. And honestly, what this chapter has taught me a lot about a lot of things about our body is it's about like our intention behind it. Is it for you? Is it for someone else?
Yeah.
I think that's a really good question to ask ourselves.
That's a great focus. What is your intention on that? And this is a good place for us to end this episode. And on our next book club, we're going to tackle the second half of chapter 3 of More Than a Body.